Happy December! It is time to talk books. This month I read a book that was like a biography of a crazy, insane business, two books on kind of how to organize your parenting life, and several really amazing novels I am so excited to tell you about. Welcome to Explore Your Enthusiasm, episode 236 with me, Swiger. Usually here we talk about the issues you're dealing with in your small creative business, but once a month I share the books I'm reading because you've asked me to, because you said you wanted to hear about them. So this month I got some really great books. The first one was Bad Blood: Secrets and Lies in Silicon Valley Startup by John Carreyrou. Now this was a thick book and it really followed the rise and unavoidable fall of this company who basically promised that they could do something that they couldn't do, that they were going to build a thing that pricked your finger and with just one drop of blood could do all of these blood tests. But the science doesn't actually make that easy. There's different kinds of chemistry involved. There's a lot of engineering of this small little thing. None of that is really what the book is about. The book is really about how did this CEO and founder, how did she get all of these people to believe in her vision and keep secret the fact that none of it was working. So she got millions of dollars in investment, in money from, if you've ever watched Shark Tank, like those kind of investors, like the sharks on there. She also made deals with like Walgreens and a small Safeway, and Safeway actually redid their stores so they would have a place to go in and get these tests done by her company. Her company never provided the product that it claimed to be providing in any way. Like, the prototypes did not work, but literally like no one in the company was entirely sure about that. And for about 10 years, this went on. And it's just crazy. Like, I kind of heard bits and pieces of the story because people liked the book and recommended it on other podcasts I listened to, but I was not prepared for how gripping it was. Like, I couldn't believe that I could not put down a business book about like a Silicon Valley startup. That's not usually the thing I read. There's no lessons. There's no like, this is how to do business. It's more like, well, we talked about imposter syndrome here recently, and a lot of us worry that we're going to be found out as a fraud and that people are going to realize that we don't know everything we have to know in order to be really successful. But once you read the story, you realize that none of us are frauds. None of us are pretending to sell something and actually making money on something that does not exist. So it's not a spoiler alert to tell you it doesn't exist. Like, you kind of get that right from the intro. And it's just like, how does this keep going for so long? When so many people realize it's not working, they actually quit the company, and yet they have to sign all these non-disclosures so kind of no one ever finds out. It's amazing. I totally recommend it if you are feeling like a fraud and if you like these kind of like real life what the heck stories. Like, a lot of people like true crime in the murdery sense. I don't really like true crime where there's violence, but this is a true crime story, like business related. So I recommend it. It was super just fun to read and just made me realize that all of our worries about being a fraud are so misplaced. We're not frauds. We're all actually selling real products that exist, and we're doing our very best. The next book I loved that I really wanted to talk more about this month is All Joy and No Fun: The Paradox of Modern Parenting by Jennifer Senior. So this book looks at the effects of children on parents. So tons of parenting books out there look at the effect of parents on their children. And this book is like, well, what happens to parents all throughout childhood? So the book has a really great intro. She explains that she's looking specifically at middle-class parents, not really the very poor who have their own completely different struggles with parenthood and making it, and not the very wealthy who, just parent in a completely different way. And so she's really looking at modern middle-class families all across America. She references tons of studies into child development, into what children want from their parents, and also what people say about their marriage and their parenting. And then she does a lot of interviews. So she talks to specific people and shares their story. And all together, it makes for a book that's like very encouraging if you're feeling like you're alone in like so many different ways. So the book is broken up that after the initial intro, she covers like infanthood, like babies and toddlers. Well, she actually covers the first chapter. So the first chapter is really about like when you become a parent, what you're kind of giving up, like some of the things, like, for example, a flow state, the ability to get in a flow, an uninterrupted, like, you know what flow is when you just are totally taken up by it. You lose all sense of time. Like being with children is kind of the opposite of that. There's questions, there's interruptions. It's really hard to get in a flow state. Also the freedom to like choose, just you want to leave the house, you leave the house. You want to eat out, you eat out. You like want to go on a trip, you don't have to like manage a bunch of other different pieces when it's just you or you and your partner. And so she talks about that and like takes it back to specific stories and studies, but it's not negative. It's not like, oh, well, all hope is lost. Because in each chapter, after that first chapter, is then about infants and toddlers and how life changes and kind of the struggles that parents of infants and toddlers face. And then she goes on to like middle childhood and all of the like the sports and the after school activities and the shuttling kids places. And then in between that, she also talks about like the joys of toddlerhood, like being with a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old who's just totally in the flow and like noticing everything and everything is wonderful and how much joy that can bring to your day. Like how many parents of kids, of toddlers talked about all the things that their toddler, like it made them just have fun. And then middle childhood and all those activities and shuttling your kid back and forth, and then teenageness and adolescence and like the stresses and the ways that adolescents changed their parents. And at the end, another chapter about kind of the joys of parenthood. If the first chapter is about the things that change in your life that you no longer have access to for a while, the last chapter is about all of the extra things you have access to. And the book is called All Joy and No Fun because it's how one of her friends explained parenthood, that there's like lots of deep, fulfilling joy, but day to day, there's a lot more work. And it really got me thinking about, and her last chapter really goes into the difference between happiness and joy. So her book was sparked by this article she wrote about this study that said that parents of children, parents, when asked about their happiness levels, said their happiness levels were lower than people without children. So it makes it look like, that study makes it look like having kids actually makes you less happy. But in fact, it's because of the way that if you think about your day-to-day life, it might be harder. But if you think about the big picture, it's more fulfilling. And I don't want to say it's more fulfilling to have kids for everybody. By no means. I mean, for people who choose to have children, they find a lot of fulfillment and joy in it, as opposed to before they had kids. Not childless people versus people with children. And it made me think, though, that this actually has nothing to do with children. This has to do with our life. How many things in our life do we choose to do because of long-term rewards and ongoing joy, like the deeper feelings of contentment and fulfillment, that day-to-day actually aren't that much fun? So things like building your own business, right? Like building your own business is all joy and no fun. Like there's day-to-day, your life is harder, especially if it's you're making it a real source of income for you. There's the money stress. There's also accounting that needs to be done, bookkeeping, labeling. Even if it's not yet a source of income, you're doing extra work nights and weekends that you wouldn't do if you didn't have a business. But you're doing it because you're after some sense of fulfillment, which is why we set goals and work towards them, is the sense of like fulfillment and completion that gives us. The same is true of marriage meant or long-term commitment to a partner. It is more work day to day. There are more dishes, there are more bills to pay, there are more groceries to buy, there are more meals to cook than not. But you make that choice because being with that particular person you think is going to bring you more fulfillment long-term than not. There's so many things in our life like this. Even having a relationship with your parents or your extended family is more work. I'm especially thinking of this because it's the holiday season, right? There's more things to do, but it brings you more joy and fulfillment than being like all alone and not connected with them. So there's so many things in our life that we choose to do, but if you're just measuring the scale of like, does this make you happier today? Is today more fun and full of fun things or less fun and full of fun things? So I thought that was really interesting because it made me realize that like all of the things in my life that have been the best things in my life have been because I've chosen long-term fulfillment and joy over short-term fun. Which is why when people tell me like, oh, when you have a baby, you'll never sleep and things will be so much harder and you won't be able to do all the fun things you get to do. It's like, right, but I've done those things. Like, I know what that's like. I don't know what this new adventure is like. And so there's a sense of fun and adventure in choosing the harder path, right? And again, this isn't for everybody. Like, these are not choices that will make everybody more fulfilled at all. I want to be super clear that kids aren't the answer to all of your joy needs. But choosing a harder path, choosing to do things that you really want to do, even though it's not going to be as easy as not doing it, that's always a good choice. So that is all joy and no fun. She makes such good points about how parenting has changed, how our expectations around parenting has changed in the last, well, basically since the idea of childhood was invented. She talks about what it used to be like, how the children would contribute financially, economically to the household, either by, helping weed the garden or helping bring in the animals or helping harvest back when we were more of an agricultural country, all the way to kids working in factories, which obviously we're not a big fan of that. But as childhood became more and more precious, children became more and more precious and they became less economically contributory towards our family, our ideas of what parents are supposed to do have changed. And we're in a state where parenting has changed so much, especially fatherhood, that there aren't kind of guidelines. Like, we don't know what's expected. We don't know what to do. And so talking that out and kind of exploring what you want that to be for yourself. She talks a little bit about that and how some families are doing that. It's not an advice book. It's not a parenting book. It's just a look. It's kind of like sociological look at modern parenting, plus some really good points that everybody I've talked to the book about has, like, it's made them feel better when they read it because they realized they weren't alone and they weren't like messing something up. So if that seems like your kind of thing, you should totally read it. The other book I read that is ostensibly about parenting but is really about how you think about organizing your life is called Time to Parent: Organizing Your Life to Bring Out the Best in Your Child and You. And she gives a really great framework for how to think about the work that you do in parenting and also in taking care of yourself. So she puts different things in categories and you want to look at like which category is getting a lot of your attention and which isn't. Actually go into more details about the book on the Take Care of Yourself podcast in an upcoming episode. So make sure you're subscribed to that. You can also go watch our discussion. It's already happened, even though it hasn't come out on the show yet, over in our Facebook group. It's Take Care of Yourself with Tara and Jolie. I'll link it up in the show notes. Go listen to us chat about that. It really helps spark a great conversation with me and Jay about things that it's easy to get wrapped up in. Like some of the tasks of parenting are like providing, which is, earning a living. Everybody has to do that. And also arranging, like making plans, being the organizer, getting the groceries in the house, planning the dinners. And those are aspects of parenthood you absolutely have to do, but that aren't child facing, right? So you might be like, your children don't realize that you're doing it. And so often people will feel bad about not spending more time with their kids, like relating or teaching, but it's because you're spending time providing or arranging. And they're not giving themselves credit for that, that that's also the work of parenting, and they're not looking at how that balance all works together. So we just had a great conversation about it. I also had a great conversation with Jolie over on Take Care of Yourself, so you can tune in there where I explain it way more. But I super enjoyed that book too. That's Time to Parent by Julie Morgenstern. So the next book I'm going to talk about is a novel that I read that was amazing. I think everybody should read this. It's already winning all kinds of awards. It's called Searcy by Madeline Miller. It's a retelling from the perspective of Searcy of the story from ancient Greek mythology. So if you read The Odyssey by Homer, which I read just a couple years ago, again, I'd read it in high school and I read it again, and I was amazed at how kind of modern and how well it holds up. But it's all about Odysseus and his journey. And one of the many stops in his journey is with Searcy, who's like a goddess witch that lives all by herself on her island. And she helps him, but she has her own whole story. She has her own backstory, both in ancient mythology, and then the author Madeline Miller kind of shapes that into a real story and into a real life. And it's fascinating. It is just like, it's so good. It's so well written. It's very lyrical. It's beautiful to read. It's beautifully written. I wanted to highlight like sentences out of every single chapter because they were just so beautifully written and really poignant. So I totally recommend Searcy, especially if you were ever into ancient mythology of the Titans and the gods on Mount Olympus. You're going to love it. Like, it's really great. She has another novel that I haven't read about Achilles. I think it's called The Song of Achilles, but I really, really recommend Searcy by Madeline Miller. This, by the way, is all linked up in the show notes. So if you go to tarswiger.com/podcast 236, you're going to find the links to everything there. So you can find all of these books. I link them up on Amazon. I also link up the Book of the Month Club because that's where I got the next novel, which is Cross Her Heart by Sarah Pinborough. Last month, I talked about the first novel of Sarah Pinborough's that I read. Cross Her Heart is the newest novel. It was good. It was mysterious. I really liked it. And the thing about Book of the Month Club is they give you different books every month to choose from. There are always 4 or 5. Often you get them on your Book of the Month Club before you can get them anywhere else. So if there's a book I really want to read and I don't want to wait the sometimes 6 months it takes to get in at the library, I will get it from the Book of the Month Club. It's the more affordable way to buy books. I love it. So you can find the link to that in the podcast show notes. I also read another novel this month that was amazing. The Wedding Date by Jasmine Gilroy, is I think how you say it. It was like, it's a romance novel. So let's just get that right out front. Like, it's a rom-com is what it is. And I have, like, after Searcy and Cross Her Heart, which is like a suspense thriller, The Wedding Date was just super fun. So I want to see the movie made out of this book because it's just great. It's super fun. It's super realistic. So it has the 2 main characters. There is a black woman and a white man, and they kind of meet cute in a broken elevator. They get to know each other. They have immediate chemistry. They go on a date together. Like, they don't live near each other, but they're kind of like immediately fall for each other, but of course things get it their way. And it's really realistic in how, without at all being awkward, it's just like a very realistic romance and a look at what would happen when the white guy has to check his privilege and his assumptions about things, and like her just being honest with him, and also because you're like seeing inside her head and her thoughts, the way that like modern beauty culture and expectations make women feel about their own bodies when they're in, he lives in LA, so she goes to some LA parties with him, and yeah, the whole time I was reading it, I was like, yes, it's very real and grounded, but super like fun and frothy and rom-com, and kind of what you hope romances are like when you're like both adults and real people. But like falling for each other. It was just adorable. So if that's your kind of thing, it's super, super well written. It's The Wedding Date by Jasmine Gilroy. She has another book called The Proposal, which I think is newer, and it also has an interracial couple at the center of it, and I just requested that from my library, so I should get it any day if somebody else isn't reading it. So that is what I read this book this this month, at least so far. I recorded this a little early because of Thanksgiving and the holidays, but just to wrap up, I would really recommend, if you are feeling stressed about parenting, that you read All Joy and No Fun. And if you want to like look at a way of organizing your life, read Time to Parent. If you really like true crime and or crazy business stories, read Bad Blood. And then everyone should just be required to read Searcy. The way that you have to read the Iliad and the Odyssey, I think you should have to read Searcy too. It's just beautifully written, very modern. Go check it out. Thank you so much for listening. Again, you can find the links to everything that I shared at tarswiger.com/podcast 236. Later this month, the Starship is opening up for a very short amount of time. It'll be from December 27th till the beginning of January. So you want to get on the list. If you're interested in all and learning more about the Starship, go sign up at tarswiger.com/starshipbiz, or look at the podcast show notes. It'll be linked up right there below wherever you're listening or watching to this. And if you enjoyed this, leave a review on iTunes or give it a thumbs up on YouTube. That helps other people find it, and it lets me know that you enjoy hearing about my books each month. Thanks again for listening, and have an excellent day.